You're listening to the Telltale channel. Don't forget to check me out on all social media: Patreon, Twitter, Teespring, and Etsy. All links can be found in the description or on my website, telltaleatheist.com. So the next article I wanted to take a look at is entitled Jehovah's Witnesses in Australia Stymie Sex Abuse Probe and Funnel Money Offshore. Absolutely no chance of this video getting monetized, so I'm not even going to bother trying to hide my language or anything. I'm just going to say it. This is by Terry Firma on the Friendly Atheist website, so let's give it a read and see what it says. If you are looking for another shocking example of religious privilege, consider that your average child molester, once credibly accused, will be unceremoniously arrested and tried, unless he's any kind of religious authority. Then, more likely than not, this happens. Here's a quote. There are less than 70,000 Jehovah's Witnesses in Australia, and yet, despite the relatively small number of members, there are at least 1,800 alleged victims of child sexual abuse linked to the church. Not a single case has been referred to the police, despite a royal commission suggesting 514 alleged abusers were worthy of investigation 4 years ago. This is Terry Firma. According to this report by news.com.au, more than 1,000 members of the Australian JW's branch are currently under suspicion of pedophilia. Oh shit. But at least the organization is contrite and looking to make amends, right? No. Here's another quote. The Christian denomination has refused to join the government's National Redress Scheme, which aims to ensure survivors of institutional child sexual abuse are acknowledged, recognized, and supported. In 2015, Australia learned about the dark underbelly within the Jehovah's Witnesses Church in the country as the Royal Commission revealed cases dating as far back as the 1950s, which had all been handled internally. 400 members were let go after these internal abuse hearings, but more than half were later reinstated, with one elder telling the hearing how notes relating to abuse claims were destroyed so they would not be discovered. This is Terry Firma again. Due to the number of possible victims, the church risks having to pay well over $75 million in compensation. That's US dollars. Australian journalists who scrutinized the sect's finances noticed that large sums of money were being transferred to other countries in an apparent effort to avoid such monetary obligations. On top of that, this is another quote. According to saysorry.org, a website set up in the hope of holding Jehovah's Witnesses organizations accountable, the church has also refused to say sorry, refused to meet with survivors, and refused to adopt any Royal Commission recommendations. Remember that the next time you hear holy rollers talk about atheists lacking a standard for morality. None of this surprises me, honestly. I'm glad that they're getting the attention that they're getting now. I think one of the biggest issues with Jehovah's Witnesses, really, it says here, in 2015, Australia learned about the dark underbelly within the Jehovah's Witnesses Church in the country as the Royal Commission revealed cases dating as far back as the 1950s, which had all been handled internally. 400 members were let go after these internal abuse hearings, but more than half were later reinstated, with one elder telling the hearing how notes relating to abuse claims were destroyed so they would not be discovered. Jehovah's Witnesses, ultimately, they want to set up a government outside of the governments that they live in. Jehovah's Witnesses want to have a running, functioning, autonomous government that is separate from the United States, that's separate from Australia, New Zealand, or European countries. That's kind of their goal. That's what they've been striving for. They have this investigation set up with the elders and everything. They have databases that store names and information about events that took place when people were wronged and things like that, dating all the way back to the 1950s. And up until very recently, I don't know if they're reporting it to the police now or not, but up until last I heard, through that entire time, they were discouraged from reporting cases to the police. That's one of the huge issues here. And elders have even been disfellowshipped for bringing it to the secular authorities because they want to run this like a government. We read a story recently about Jehovah's Witnesses on the podcast, and Russia accused them of trying to set up a government outside of the Russian government. And that's true. In many ways, that is true. They have a system set up so that they are the final authority on everything, and they handle all cases according to biblical standards, basically. So they use systems set up in the Bible to accuse people, to try people, and the ultimate punishment they give to people who have perpetrated these sins, not crimes, sins, is shunning. They excommunicate them. They disfellowship them. They don't report it to the secular authorities like they're supposed to, and that leads to abusers slipping through the cracks, getting away with it. For a while, Jehovah's Witnesses had a system set up where if there weren't two victims, if there was only one victim and no witnesses to the event, they couldn't do anything. The victim would tell the elders what happened, and they would just sit on that. They would just write it down, put it in a file somewhere, and wait until the day another victim appeared. So what these people were doing all through the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, even 2000s, even more recently than that, they would abuse somebody. Their name would get written down in a book somewhere and filed away. They'd switch congregations, and they'd do it again, because it's basically as though nothing happened. If it's not two witnesses, if two witnesses weren't there, or two victims, it's like it didn't happen. So they'd go to their current congregation, they'd abuse somebody, their name get written down, they'd move to a new congregation where their name isn't written down, they'd abuse a new person. Their name would get written down there, they'd move to a new congregation, they'd abuse somebody. This was a cycle that happened for decades, and the Watchtower Society was sued and lost the lawsuit because they weren't providing the names to the secular authorities because they wanted to run their own stupid little fucking government. That's kind of how it works, and that's why they're in hot water right now. And as we can see, they've decided to hide the money so that they don't have to pay restitution or fines or anything like that. Does not surprise me about the Jehovah's Witnesses at all, honestly. Doesn't surprise me. That's what I've come to expect from this corporation. I don't know how anybody in their right mind can defend something like this. This is absolutely disgusting. If they ever had the mandate of heaven, if they ever had Jehovah's mandate, which they didn't because Jehovah isn't real, but if they did, they don't now. Not with this type of behavior.